When the River Runs Dry, Wednesday, January 8, 2014, 12:45 p.m. "How's it?" says a tall, whippet-thin man approaching me. I'm sitting in the foyer of the Nationwide Bank on St. George's Terrace, and I rise to shake his long, outstretched hand. He towers over me like a telecommunications antenna. I notice he wears the same 80s-styled, square-rimmed glasses as Uncle Frank, except the lenses are thicker than Coke bottle glass. "Dan Djurdjevic," I say by way of introduction. "Pleased to meet you, Mr. Djurdjevic. My name is Carl." He is smiling warmly. "Hello, Carl." "No, Carl." He enunciates his name very carefully and slowly. I look down at his name badge. It says Kyle Verschrikkelijk. Beneath his name badge is a pin showing the Rainbow Nation flag of South Africa. "So how may I help you today, Mr. Djurdjevic?" "Well, I seem to have maxed out my credit cards, and I will be needing a bit of assistance," I say, feeling a hot flush in my face and neck. Beads of sweat start to well in my scalp. "Ah," he nods knowingly. "A bit of festive season madness." "No worries, my friend. This way, we'll see what we can do," he says, gesturing to the booth. I walk in to find a small desk with a computer. Kyle weaves his lanky frame behind it, almost like a python, and cranes forward. Frowning so deeply his top lip lifts in a sneer. His hugely magnified eyes scrutinize the screen at a distance of only 20 centimeters or so. Without looking away, he says, "Card, please," and extends his arm, palm upwards, like an inverted backhoe. I sit there puzzled for a moment, then quickly fish out my wallet and give him my MasterCard. He pushes it into a slot on the keyboard and starts typing. After a while, his mouth opens, wide, then shuts. He leans back, puts his hands behind his head, and whistles through his teeth. "Shh. Oh boy, I can't believe it. You sure I've spent a lot of money lately?" He takes a deep breath and exclaims, "Yura!" "Yes, my wife, I'm afraid. She got a bit carried away this year." But Kyle isn't listening. He's shaking his head. "I just can't believe it, man." He sighs and visibly collapses his shoulders, like a circus tent whose middle pole has been removed. "Take a look." He swivels the monitor around and jabs his finger at the figures on the screen. "I have never seen anything like this in my whole entire life. Yes, like." We sit in this impasse for what seems like an eternity. I don't know how to respond. Finally, Kyle says, "So, what would you like me to do?" I was hoping I could refinance my mortgage. Maybe cover the cost of the spending?" He looks at me skeptically. "What is your occupation?" "I'm a lawyer." He wheels the monitor back and starts tapping away at the keyboard, shaking his head all the while. "I don't know, let me see." A few minutes later, he starts asking details: the value of our house, my salary, my various repayments, principally Kylie's BMW, and the likely weekly expenses. Then abruptly he spins the screen back towards me. "This," he says emphatically, "is the best I can do for you." It takes me all of a minute to see that the terms and conditions are far from attractive. But I can also see that the bank has me over a barrel. A few minutes later, I'm signing the relevant documents. "Now, will there be anything else?" Kyle is smiling warmly again. "Maybe you need some free financial advice." Oh, free financial advice? Yes, definitely, I say. Kyle leans forward. "Spend less." 1:30 p.m. I'm standing on the pavement outside the central branch of Nationwide Bank, being blasted by the gusts of wind that might as well be from a hurricane, waiting for the crosswalk man to turn green. It's funny. Kyle said he came from the Windy City, Cape Town. I've never been there. But I wonder whether the name is better suited to Perth. Today, like most days, the windows in Brad's office would, if they weren't blocked with cupboards, reveal a relentlessly choppy river with little white crests of foam scattered uniformly across the expanse of blue water, the giant flag flailing frenetically high above the Narrows Bridge. We call our sea breeze the Fremantle Doctor. Some days it turns up late. On very rare occasions, never. But mostly it turns up like clockwork in the mid-afternoon. Today it's early and strong. It's pushing and shoving me like a mob of Neds in downtown Glasgow. And boy, is it cold. So cold I'm shaking uncontrollably with goosebumps creeping up my arms and down my back. Don't get me wrong, I'm loving it. For one thing, it provides a welcome break from the heat we've been having. For another, it lets me hold out my arms like wings so my armpits will dry. Lastly, the wind feels so busy, so all-encompassing, it helps me forget about things for a while, but not for long. From the nearby arcade, the wind gusts drop sound bites of Elvis Costello's Oliver's Army, and I am brought back to reality. And I would rather be anywhere else but here today. How about this? Kyle versus Kylie. I've never thought of it before, but the names are so similar. Yet in this case you couldn't find two greater opposites. One is male, one is female. One is tall, one is short. One is friendly, one isn't. One is careful with money, one is careless. One is brutally honest, one is brutally deceitful. I had it out with Kylie last night. Brad had taken half an hour to get to the service station. He arrived looking positively sheepish and maybe a little drunk. I let him pay my bill and walked back to my car without a word. He followed me, trying to chat amiably, but I shut the door as he was mid-sentence and drove off. Kylie was similarly cheery when I got home, suspiciously so. She was whistling tunelessly as I opened the door, loading the dishwasher, which I've never seen her do before. "Oh, hello, darling. How was it at your parents' house?" I said nothing, hung up my car keys on the hook near the front door, and walked into the kitchen. Kylie walked up to give me a peck on the cheek, but I stepped back. "What's wrong?" she asked, her eyes wide. "What the fuck was Brad doing here?" "Oh, that!" Kylie waved her hand breezily. "He just came over to have a chat with you, silly. He forgot you were going to your mum's and dad's for dinner." She scanned my face and could tell I wasn't buying it. "You don't think that Brad and I..." "I told you before, we're like brother and sister, really." That's not how it sounded over the phone. Kylie abruptly appeared hurt. "Well, if you're going to be stupid, then that's your problem, not mine. He came over to visit you. I don't see why you're cross with me." "If he came to visit me, but found I wasn't here, why didn't he just leave?" There was a silence during which Kylie stared at me, hands on her hips. "What's up with you, Dan? You've never been so paranoid before. You know I do stuff with Brad, stuff like tennis." "Yes, and yoga, and girls' nights out, and God knows what else." "Now you're being totally ridiculous," Kylie snorted. "Brad's just like one of the girls. I don't see why you're suddenly making such a big deal about it." She turned back to continue stacking the dishwasher, her cheerful disposition long gone. "I see that he stayed for dinner," I said, surveying the table. 2 empty wine glasses remain, one marked with lipstick, and that it was a candlelit one. At this, Kylie turned to face me, then flung down the spoon she was holding, so hard that it bounced up, hit one of my knees, and then disappeared under the fridge. Bugsy, who was standing nearby, fled in terror. "That," she hissed in a very Gollum-like way, pointing to the candles on the table, "was meant for you, mister." Then she stomped off to our bedroom and slammed the door. I must confess that this caught me off guard initially. The idiot that I am, I actually started to feel embarrassed. Then it occurred to me that she had no reason to plan a candlelit dinner for me. She had known at least 3 days in advance that I was having dinner at my parents' house that night. Her comment was even stranger when I considered that she had never once done anything vaguely romantic before. I stood in the kitchen for a while, the entire house silent, but for the buzzing of the fridge. My confrontation with Kylie hadn't produced any real result. At the same time, I felt a whole lot better knowing I had, at least, drawn some sort of line in the sand. I knew that what I desperately needed to do was talk to Kylie about the household budget. Clearly that would have to wait to another time. Of course, I had long suspected that our financial problems were becoming dire, that we needed to do something to curb our, or rather her, spending. Unfortunately, my own policy of turning a blind eye meant that I had no idea just how bad things actually were. So I went to my room, logged onto the computer, and went to the online banking site of Nationwide Bank. It confirmed my worst fears. In fact, I wouldn't know the full extent of the problem until I called the bank the following day. I sighed deeply and shut down. For the first time ever, I decided not to sleep in our bedroom. Instead, I went to the cupboard, reached up to the top shelf, and dragged out the swag Uncle Frank had given me a decade ago, but which I'd never used. After wiping off a layer of dust, I unrolled it, stripped down to my undies, put on a spare t-shirt, and crawled in. 1:35 p.m. I've been thinking about all of this while waiting at the crosswalk just outside the Nationwide Bank. I realize that I've waited through more than 3 changes of lights. Some people are looking at me weirdly because I'm standing there with my arms outstretched, like the statue of Christ the Redeemer in Rio. Suddenly I realize that's where Uncle Frank, or Samir, is living now. I wonder if his surgery went okay. I want to go back to the Wanneroo house and check the emails. Sadly, the earliest chance I'll get to do that is Friday night. Anyway, I'm finally dry, the walking man has turned green, and so I cross the terrace in the bright Perth sunshine, tacking against the wind like a sailing boat. I'm hoping that these are winds of change. I might have just bought a little time. But Uncle Frank was right. I have to change the status quo, and I have to do it soon.